Hi, and welcome to RecoverED, a podcast from the Magdalen House, a recovery community for alcoholism. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas, and known affectionately by many as Maggies. Every first and third Wednesday, we share an episode from one of our 3 podcast series. The RecoverED podcast is made to educate the community on alcoholism, the Magdalen House, our programs, and resources we offer to the community. In each episode, you will get to know the disease of alcoholism a little better, and soon you'll know how you can shatter the stigma around alcoholism in your community. With your host, me, Laura Wilson, recovered alcoholic and communications coordinator here at the Magdalen House. We are so glad you're here. Thanks for listening. Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of RecoverED. My name is Laura Wilson, and I am the host and communications coordinator here at the Magdalen House. And today I have a very special guest on. We have someone who has been in recovery for a very long time, is a mother, and has been active in the Maggies community since 2007. So welcome, Lisa. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you, Laura. I'm happy to be here.
I'm really excited for today's topic. I think it's going to help answer a lot of confusion and a lot of questions about alcoholism as my responsibility. So Lisa, when you first realized you had a drinking problem, what did you do?
Great question. So one of the things that I started to do in not knowing about what the disease of alcoholism really was, I tried to take responsibility by trying to stop drinking. And because that's what my family was telling me to do, that's what the solution I thought was, that I just needed to learn how to stop drinking. And then every time I stopped drinking, I was more miserable than I was when I was drinking. So of course, my mind always went back to, I know I'll fix that, drinking. And then there came a point where I had to lie about my drinking. I had to pretend that I was doing things on purpose, that I really didn't understand why, when I really wanted to stop, that everything was in peril. Everything I loved, everything I thought I knew was important to me, I was about to lose. And then I would still drink anyway. There was no one who was more confused about why I couldn't stop, even when I was taking responsibility. I was going to AA, I was going through the steps, I was really trying to make a lot of meetings, just like I was being told. I was trying to take responsibility. As the big book talks about, I really tried. But I didn't know first what my problem was, and that is the crux of the issue. I had to be educated on the disease of alcoholism before I could even start to get into the solution. So I was trying to get into the solution before I really realized what the problem was. So therefore, when I was introduced to really what step 1 was all about, I started to figure out what part of the disease I could take responsibility for. And it started to become very clear to me what I was responsible for and what I was not.
You mentioned that it's a disease. Can you explain a little bit more on why it's a disease?
Yes, perfect. I love that question. One time when I was starting to go through the steps, a woman asked me, "Are you powerless over alcohol?" And I said, yes. And she said, "Is your life unmanageable?" And I said, yes. And she said, "Congratulations, you just took step 1. So for a long time, if I was just looking at the steps on the wall, I really felt like that's what step 1 was. When someone actually got the book out, opened the book, turned to pages that supported what the disease model looked like, I began to truly understand what the disease of alcoholism really was and what step 1 meant. And in a nutshell, what it is, and this was explained to me quickly, it doesn't take time, is when I drink, can I stop abruptly? It doesn't matter what I drink, when I drink, who I drink with, or actually how much I drink. When I start, can I stop at 9 o'clock at night, switch to water, and go to bed? I thought that was the biggest problem I had, was my alcohol consumption. It turns out that is the least of the 2 issues, because the bigger issue is when I am sober. I wake up the next morning and tell my husband, tell my children, tell myself, I'm never going to drink again. And I meant it. And then by 5 o'clock, I'd already taken the first drink and I was drunk. So what this talks about in the big book is that it's not an alcohol problem. Alcohol is actually my solution. My problem is that I have a mind that convinces me I don't have an allergy. I don't have an abnormal reaction. I believe my mind because my mind is designed to protect me. It will protect me in all other areas of my life. So it became apparent, based on the big book, based on the knowledge in my vast experience with drinking that this is a mental illness. It's of the mental variety, because when I tell myself I'm never going to and I mean it and then I drink again, it becomes immediately not a physical disease, it becomes a mental disease. And so the disease of alcoholism centers in my mind rather than my body. And I thought it was the opposite of that. Once I understood that I have no control over the amount I take and I have no choice whether I'm going to drink again, I started to relax and move into the solution. But I didn't realize I had a disease. I thought I just had an alcohol drinking issue. And so it became really clear once I saw that I wasn't responsible for my disease, but I was responsible for the solution.
Right, because you can't control the way that your body reacts to it. Even though it's an allergy, you can't take any Benadryl or Zyrtec or anything like that.
And we'll always be alcoholics, right?
Right.
It's never cured.
Right.
I'm always going to be an alcoholic. Exactly.
Yeah. How did that make you feel when you realized that it was a disease and that you didn't cause it?
Well, I did not get hope in that statement, because this guy, when he was explaining it to me, told me that I was going to die from it. And it scared me. It really did scare me, because I was never scared before. I always thought I could rely on self, that I could just stop on my own, because I had before in the past, but it's a progressive disease. So it got to the point where I couldn't do that anymore. So when he said that, I was definitely in fear. But you know what, Laura? What I really felt in that moment was relief, because I thought I was a bad person. I thought it was a behavior issue. And when he's telling me it's something that I have no control over and I have no choice around, it really gave me a little bit of relief, only because in the next part of his explanation, he told me that there was a solution. He told me that he had had the same problem that I had, and yet he had not had a drink in 20 years. And he told me that there was a solution, and I leaned in. I became interested in what he had to say, only because he positioned the disease model as something that I could never control and I could never choose.
Right. It almost sounds like when you accepted that powerlessness, right? Like you're powerless over the way your body reacts to it and you're powerless over your mind. It almost sounded like that admission of powerlessness was an empowerment in a way. So what else did that look like for you?
So what he kept telling me is that my mind was going to go to, I don't feel like doing it. I don't want to do it. And he kept pushing the fact that this is not a feelings program. This is an action program. And that I am not responsible for the part of my disease that I can't cure. But what I am responsible is for the part of the disease, the solution part of it. And that I had to take the action no matter how I felt. I always reacted on feelings my whole life. I still do, for sure, today. But what he said was, it doesn't matter how much you feel like it is your responsibility or your shame, the disease part of it. You just have to take the action as millions of people have done before you, and that is your responsibility now for the rest of your life. So
what does that responsibility of taking action look like once you come to that realization?
Well, I started on step 2, and we turned to pages in the book. He explained what step 2 meant, and then he explained what step 3 meant, that I'd gotten several desire tips with people telling me I just needed to turn it over. And I really didn't understand what that meant. And so what he did talk about was the decision I was making in step 3 was that I was going to make a decision to learn how to turn it over, to learn how to live on a spiritual basis. And then that action was going to take place, and it was going to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. And that would become my new responsibility, not to focus on alcohol, but to focus on how I could get more spiritually fit every single day. And the other thing that was really interesting and gave me freedom is that I wasn't doing it for my own benefit. I was doing it so that I could bear witness, and I was doing it for others. And so it became something that it wasn't about me anymore. It was really about others. And that actually got me excited, because I felt like maybe this alcoholism or maybe my experience could benefit others. And I never felt like that before. I always wanted to hide it because I was ashamed of it. And it really was a double-edged sword, because not only was by pursuing this action, I was going to stay sober, because that was a promise, but I was also going to use it to a higher purpose. And that became something that I really look forward to. And so it's so interesting when I talk to families about whether it's their fault, the alcoholic in their life, it's their fault or not their fault. It's not their fault. It really is not. But what is their responsibility is to continue to take the action for the rest of their lives.
I love that. That's so beautiful. What would you say to someone who, maybe still has some shame and some guilt? They haven't quite gotten through the steps yet, and they're maybe only at step 2 or 3. Step 3, they're making the decision to go through the rest of the steps. And they don't necessarily feel like that their experience, like they can't see the other end of it, where their experience is going to help someone else because they still don't feel good inside. What would you say to someone who's feeling like that?
So I felt that way for a long time, probably the first year or two of recovery or sobriety. I felt a lot of shame around a lot of things I'd done. And my sponsor kept telling me at the time, just to push through it, that there would be someone God would put someone in your life who could benefit from your experience. So while my motive was just to go out and try to help people, because that was part of the promises that I would then be helped more, I didn't understand what the shame element and the purpose of that, because I still felt it. But the first time someone was put in my life and I got to talk to her about some of the things that I felt shameful about, when I talked to her about those, and it helped her to open up, it helped her to become more vulnerable because she trusted me, then the shame started to go away. And it's not even that the shame went away, it's the shame became, it had a different purpose. And it wasn't a negative thing. It was actually, it became a positive thing. It became an asset in my life. So you may not understand what all of the shame and all the pain and the things that you've caused this newcomer, and not feel great about it in the beginning. But just know that someday a woman's going to come into your life that needs to hear that part of your story. And the only reason she's going to trust you is because you have the same experience. And the other part of that, the second part of what you asked, which I think is really important, that's the beginning of faith. I didn't understand that my story was really going to help someone else. I was hopeful, but when it really started to help someone else, and when I thought it was my worst liability, and then it truly became my greatest asset, that was the planting the seedlings of faith, because what I thought was a liability was actually an asset, and then I was wrong. I was wrong about what I thought. And so when I was proven wrong by someone else who benefited from that, I'm like, well, then you know what? Maybe I'm wrong about more. I can lean into what I think is I can lean away from what I think the result's going to be and lean into something that people are telling me. And that was the beginning of my faith. I made decisions. I did things when I didn't even think. I didn't want to. I didn't want to share. I didn't want to do certain things. And I did it, had a different outcome. And I really believe it's the seedlings of faith in some of those moments in early recovery.
Yeah, and it really sounds like that maybe your pain became your purpose.
Yes.
Yeah. Really what I'm hearing is that I'm not responsible for my drinking, right? I didn't choose to be an alcoholic. Just like I don't choose to, have diabetes or have cancer, but my responsibility is taking action to do something about it. But it still takes time. I know for me personally, it took many years for me to finally get to that level of powerlessness and acceptance. So if our responsibility is working the steps and taking action, what does that action look like? Do I just breeze through the steps? Am I being honest and thorough? I mean, what does that responsibility look like and how I'm working the steps?
Great question. I thought once I took the steps, and my family thought this too, once I got to step 12, there was a finish line. There was a box check. I could just, okay, I'm finished with the steps. I always thought the goal was to finish step 12. And that's what my family thought too. And my sponsor was like, no, your responsibility for the rest of your life is 10, 11, and 12. And I don't do it for relapse prevention. I do it to grow spiritually. But what that looked like in the beginning to get oriented into a life of service was that I had to do 3 things. 1, I had to find a home group. I had to go to meetings several nights a week. I had to put myself out there to sponsor women, raise my hand, even when I didn't want to. I was scared to death to do it because I thought I was going to hurt someone. My ego was really large then. But the biggest thing that my sponsor really made an impression is that I had to go out and I had to carry the message. So she got me working, she connected to several places, Homeward Bound or the 2-4. I went to Timberline. I went and that's how I found the Magdalen House. She told me to go onto this little house over in East Dallas. My point is that I was gone 5 nights a week early in recovery, and I couldn't be gone during the day because my husband worked. So at night was really the only time I could go and carry the message and go to my meetings and work with others. So my husband was getting really irritated with me in the first 2 years of my recovery because for a decade I was gone because I was drunk all the time. And then I get into this recovery thing, and he thought I just had a kind of another addiction and that I was gone all the time. So why, like, it's not better than me drinking all the time if I'm gone all the time and he's still not getting help with the children. And so the interesting thing, what I really try to impart on families is that my family thought you finish with the steps, you're done. You're done with the program. You're cured. You're saved. You're not going to drink anymore. And that's the total opposite of what has to happen is that once I get into 10, 11, 12, those are the 3 steps that I'll be doing for the rest of my life. Early in recovery, I had to be disciplined about it. I wasn't disciplined for so long. And what I tell families is in the beginning, they're going to go off in a spiritual intoxication. It's going to be unbalanced for a long time. But that is the road to discipline. It will get back and it will, rock itself back to normal where there's balance. In the beginning, it's very unbalanced with the alcohol consumption. It's very unbalanced with the selfishness and self-centeredness and all the ways that alcoholics are not involved in their life and their family. Then when they get into early recovery, they're not involved either. Like, they're out all the time doing these things that are required at step 12. But I reassure families that it will get balanced. And it's just a requirement, especially in early recovery where it feels unbalanced, but it's actually the road to success. The more time that you can spend figuring out where the balance happens, the more time that you can spend in recovery and helping other alcoholics is the best way to build a case or a supportive environment, a community where you can sustain long-term recovery, if that makes sense. It took a long time to build that basis for recovery. It didn't just happen overnight because I finished the steps. It took a long time. And I spent a lot of time away from my children and my family, especially my first 2 years of recovery. It really did.
Yeah, it sounds like you were gone a lot in your drinking and then gone a lot when you got sober.
Exactly.
How did that affect your family? Did they expect to have this, like you mentioned that, your husband thought that once you finished step 12, like you were done with the steps. It mentions in the book that we do have a long period of reconstruction. So did that being gone helping other alcoholics help that long road of reconstruction with your family, or did it harm them because you were still gone?
Absolutely. It's a great question again. Yes, I was gone a lot in early recovery. And my husband did not understand why I was gone and why it took so long, why it took so much of my time. There's a story where my sponsor had come over and done the steps with me, and she was walking out the door. And my husband was on the front porch, and she said, well, I'll see you tomorrow night. And my husband answered for me and said, no, she won't be there. We've got a family obligation at school. And my sponsor just smiled at him and said, well, I hope you like having a drunk wife. And he got really irritated, and I did too. And I felt like in that moment, I was making a decision between recovery and my family. And it felt weird. It felt shameful. I did go to my home group the next night. I did not go to the family obligation. But one of the things that became clear and clear to me is that the more time that I put in early recovery and helping others was time that I could really be with my children. It wasn't the quantity of time I was spending with my children. It became about the quality. The more time I put into recovery, the better mom I became. And it showed over time. So the time that I was putting into early recovery, I didn't understand what the outcome would be. I just trusted her because she'd had the same experience. She has children too. And my husband didn't have the experience. My kid, none of us knew what we were doing. But all I did know for sure was that I wanted what she had. She had the results. I followed what she did, not what my husband wanted me to do. And I haven't had a drink in a while. You know, Laura, the other thing too, you mentioned my family and missing me. I knew that when I was doing all the work in early recovery and sponsoring so many people early on, because a lot of people will ask you to sponsor them early on because you're carrying the message a lot, you're out there a lot, you're exposed a lot, and people, they really, a lot of people will ask you to sponsor them. My children could hear me on the phone when I was doing 10 steps. When I had women over doing step work, they watched me starting to have a different purpose, to really get into and get joy from helping others. They were watching me drink. They were also watching me into the solution. I had people over at my house. I was on the phone a lot and they were listening. So while I couldn't tell them if this was working, they were watching me and watching the results of what I was doing and that it really was working. Not that I was just staying sober, but that I was becoming a different person. And they had a happy mom again. They had a mom that was full of life again, that laughed. And it was just, I think as much as I was doing it for others, in those moments I was doing it for my children, and I didn't even know that I was, and I didn't know they were watching me, but they were.
That's absolutely beautiful. So it sounds like that once I don't want to say complete my steps, but once I go through the steps, my responsibility shifts from working the steps honestly and thoroughly to then the responsibility to help others. What does that responsibility look like in your daily life?
So again, I can't choose whether I'm going to drink or not. I cannot choose that. But what I can do is I can choose whether I'm going to continue to work the program, where I'm going to continue to do 10, 11, and 12 for the rest of my life. It interferes with a lot of things. It really does. And even 17 years later, I will be in a meeting or I'll be at dinner with my family and I'll have to put my finger up and go, I'm so sorry, I have to walk out. In the beginning, my family got irritated or they didn't understand it, but now they almost like it when I leave and go and answer the phone or do, because they know that when I come back, I'm going to be a different person and I'm going to be grateful. What it looks like is the same as it did when I was first sober. The only difference now is that I have balance. I really do. I still do take phone calls. I still have women over doing step work at my house. I still do all the things I did in early recovery. It's just that now what I can do is I can say, you know what? I'm going to do it at this time instead of all the time. I've just gotten a lot of balance from it. And it really is, again, it's different because my kids, my family, even my workplace saw results in what was happening. So they quit questioning and they encouraged me to do it rather than looking at it as something that they were missing out on. They started looking at the time I was spending in recovery as something that was going to help me to become a better mom, a better contributor to the community. And they started to respect it and admire it. And it became something that became a part of me instead of just something I did. It became a necessary part of who I was, who I am.
Yeah, it sounds like you really enjoy helping alcoholics.
I do. I love being a mom. I think I'm a good mom now, which I never thought before. There's a lot of things in my life that I enjoy, but there's nothing that gives me greater joy than to watch a woman's lights come on or this aha moment when she figures out that she's just an alcoholic and that there is a solution. And that the worse off you are, the better chance you have to survive it and to sustain long-term recovery, just like someone did for me. The feeling is so euphoric and magical. And I get euphoria from my kids. I do. I love being a mom. I love being a part of a really cool family. But the best feelings that I've ever, the immediate euphoria, the immediate magic in my life has always come from when a woman looks at me and says thank you. I have hope for the first time in a long time that I might survive. And that I can use what I put my family through to help another woman. That is my responsibility now. I can't choose whether I'm going to be an alcoholic, but I can choose whether I'm going to wake up every day, get on my knees, talk to God, bear witness to others, and take that part of who I am and share it. That is my responsibility. And I have to do that whether my family understands it or not. I have to, and now I want to. And it's weird to have that change. My family watched it. I did it in the beginning in spite of what they wanted me to do, and now I do it and they encourage me, and it has just become a part of our whole family dynamic. And yes, I do love it. It's weird. I can't believe I'm sitting here telling you how much I love helping drunk women, right? And the drunker they are, the better, because they're mean. But I was mean too.
That is absolutely incredible, Lisa. I'm just sitting here in awe. It truly is, I don't know what I'm saying, whatever. It's so beautiful how it turns in. I mean, there are definitely still days that I don't want to do this, or I don't feel like going to a meeting, or I don't feel like, meeting for a fifth step. But like you said, it's not a feelings program. And I heard it somewhere once, like, I'm not recovered because of my step 1. I'm recovered because of somebody else's step 12.
Yes.
If someone is listening in early recovery, or they're still struggling with anything that we've talked about, whether they're responsible for their own drinking or their own recovery, what would you want them to hear or take away from what we've talked about today?
Well, first of all, I remember back when I was trying to figure out why I was an alcoholic, because I was actually trying to figure out how I could not be one, because there's no why about it. Early on, I really still did not understand why helping others was going to help me to not drink. And I just had when someone was telling me what to do next, I had to just follow their direction. I couldn't question. I could question in my head, but I had to take the action anyway, whether I felt like it or not. That's something that's so hard for a newcomer to understand, that you just have to have blind faith in this person who's standing in front of you. And the only reason that I did do that was because of alcohol, vodka. Vodka was the great persuader that got me to not question, just to take the next step, whether I wanted to or not, just like you spoke about. But the bigger thing from this talk that we're doing is I would like to talk to the family member, because the family member is not going to understand, is almost going to get like jealous. Or my husband, I came home from rehab and I was talking about this book and these steps, and he was like, so you're telling me that a $7 book is what caused this transformation when we had been spending thousands of dollars, so much time over a decade, and you come home and tell me that you have been transformed over a $7 book? I don't believe it. So then I tried to explain it to him, and the bottom line is my family didn't need to understand about the disease of alcoholism. They just saw that Mama wasn't drinking anymore, and that was my responsibility to continue to do that. So what I would tell the newcomer is that you take the action no matter how you feel, because that is your responsibility. And I would tell the family member that it's going to look weird in the beginning. It's going to feel weird. Like they're going to be on this euphoric high, and they're going to want to share this with everybody. They're going to want to tell you about it. They're going to want you to be a part of their spiritual journey. And if you could just have patience with them in the beginning, because it will pay off. And the harder they are into the spiritual intoxication, weird, like not unrealistic world, then that really is the basis for long-term recovery. It's the opposite of what you think, that it will balance out. I wish I could tell that to every newcomer family that the more unbalanced they seem and the more spiritually intoxicated they are, the better chance they have for long-term recovery. Just have patience.
I love it. This has been such a wonderful topic, and I'm so excited that we get to put this out there. Is there anything else that we left out that you want to say?
No, I just think, like, again, I can't choose whether I'm an alcoholic. I can't choose whether I'm going to drink or not, but it is my responsibility what I do with the solution. And the interesting thing about that is that's what gives me the power. I get access to the power, and the more work I do, the more access I have to the power. And it's just to the extent that how much time I put into it is how much I get out of it. But I have to put into it first before I get out.
I love it. Thank you so much, Lisa.
You're welcome.
This has been RecoverED, hosted by Laura Wilson and brought to you by the Magdalen House. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Tune in every first and third Wednesday for a release from one of our 3 podcast series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels by searching for the Magdalen House.